What we see in our society is, we have a way of truth called science. Our society today, and we have a way of goodness called technology or policy.
Right.
And the way of beauty has no name and is constantly collapsed into these other realms.
Hello and welcome to While We're Talking About Rabbits. Now, let me do this is the Southern accent from South Carolina. While we're talking about rabbits. While we're talking about rabbits. This is John Heers. This is our podcast. This is where we talk about heavy things lightly. We do it from the perspective of these guys who go and these women who go overseas and both here at home to do what we call small project development with the world's extreme poor. We do it all over the place. Check us out at www.first-things.org. This is WAWTAR. This is an interview with Dr. Timothy Patitsas. Yeah, he wrote Ethics of Beauty. That book is hot. That book is heavy and light and hot. Dr. Patitsas is the Dean of Hellenic College in Boston. He's an assistant professor and has been so since 2005. He is a philosopher, and he is deeply, deeply invested in the notion and studying the notion of trauma and how that works. And his book, his book says something beautiful. You got to check it out. Today on WAWTAR. So, Dr. Timothy Patitsas, thank you. How are you doing?
John, fantastic. Doing good.
You're probably the perfect guest and my favorite person ever for wearing your West Virginia hat, even though I'm not a fan.
Why is that? Are you guys from West Virginia or just?
No, here's why. Because today I did not. I often wear a baseball cap because, I don't know, the informality of it all makes me happy. And I usually wear a Mets hat. Sometimes I'll throw something else in there. And then you came on, this wonderful author I couldn't wait to speak to with clear intellectual depth, and you got a West Virginia baseball hat on. That makes me happy.
my nephew's a student at WVU. My niece was too before him. Yeah, my head gets cold, and that's why I wear it. But yes. Another nice thing is that if you do a podcast with a baseball hat, then you don't wear it. People don't recognize you, so you can go back to being anonymous.
Well, let's see if we can make you less anonymous because you took. So we'll talk about the book. Our gig on here is to try to figure out heavy things lightly and then do it in part to bring in the experiences of our field workers at First Things who are working in really old world places like West Africa and Georgia and Guatemala with the Mayan folk and whatnot. But your book is like a perfect entree into some really beautiful conversations about stuff old. In particular, your theory of ethics, this use of the word beauty. So I guess without getting too, I don't know, I like the weeds, but just take us through. There's this old world imagery in your writing about above and below. And it's like beauty got put below, and then modern people took below as bad or something, or like not relevant. And am I reading that right? Did beauty get demoted in post-Enlightenment society to a point where you're like, well, it's really not trustworthy. Can't really trust that. Is that something like what you're trying to say when you talk about ethics of beauty your way?
When you write a book, you kind of start with a basic premise and you unfold it. Certainly, most of the work for the book was done, 4 or 5 years before it printed, and your thinking continues to unfold and evolve, and then sometimes things could be more nuanced, or but somehow, I guess I guess kind of one orthodox idea is that somehow the way of the heart was diminished in the West.
Mm.
And it's hard to say when, but for some people it's maybe the 13th century or 12th century that somehow the university professor pushes aside the mystic as being the authentic spokesman for theology and for the church. And but that could be nuanced 1,000 ways, right? It's not really until the late 1800s at Vatican I and afterwards that the Roman Catholic Church really names St. Thomas Aquinas as the doctor of he is a doctor of the church, but puts him as almost as this is it.
Right.
And then you can nuance that too. You can say, okay, within the Thomist system, there's a lot of reference to Dionysius the Areopagite and what's really going on there. But I think what we see in our society is we have a way of truth called science. Our society today, and we have a way of goodness called technology or policy.
Right.
And the way of beauty has no name and is constantly collapsed into these other realms. Like abstract art is a kind of intellectualization of art, and somehow I think that feminists and people like that should take note. Somehow the proscription against beauty and against the way of the heart also goes to this notion of Western logocentrism, like they call it. It has to go somehow to this, that the feminine is suspect.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's something, yeah.
Well, it gets caught up in emotion. You're like, well, thanks for the emotion. Thanks for weighing in with your emotion, which of course moves toward hysteria, which of course is associated with the feminine. And then all of a sudden, none of that counts toward an understanding of right or wrong or goodness or truth. Yeah, that's fascinating.
And then so all of that, you could, people can slice and dice things and they can defend whatever. But I see it more vividly in terms of science itself, because my mentor and my friend, the last 6 years of her life, was the late Jane Jacobs. And she wrote The Death and Life of Great American Cities, and it's a great book about city planning, that's true. But in the final chapter, she says, hey, guess what? There's a new kind of science that we've only really discovered since 1932. And she's writing in 1961, publishing in 61. So within 30 years. And it is the science of organized wholes, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's the science of systems, of organic complexity. And this realm, now it's 2022. So what is that? 61 years later, still does not get the direct, sustained attention it deserves in the academy. And it's because that is the science that corresponds to wholeness or beauty.
Right.
And it's a science that somehow women seem to be poised to make more lasting contributions to. And so I think even if you remove, let's say, the Orthodox versus Catholic or East versus West thing.
Sure. I love that stuff, by the way. But yeah, let's get it out of there for a second.
For a second, you can just say, even within science itself, this kind of truth first science of statistics, this goodness first science of two variable reductionism, hey, those get respected as real. And this other science, gets pushed.
Yeah.
And the whole academy should have been revolutionized after Death and Life was published. We all should have said, every professor should have said, oh, there's three kinds of scientific problem solving, and I can see clearly that in my field, we need all three.
Right.
And let's be explicit about when we're using which. And the university is dull and ridiculous because it hasn't taken that foundational step.
So help with folks who haven't read the book, The Ethics of Beauty, guys. We'll talk about, I'll link it. But the Ethics of Beauty. So just give us a little, what is the science of beauty, or the science of the whole? I know you're not going to be able to do logos with it, right? You won't be able to do truth words on some level you have to experience it, but how would you try to help us understand it in word?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't get asked that a lot. What is this science of the whole? Well, it was when we're looking at, well, right here in Boston, there's something called EGC, the Emmanuel Gospel Center, and it's an evangelical Protestant research center and center for urban ministry, gospel ministry, and they they are very explicit about trying to use an organic systems approach. So they have a book that they use. One of their directors wrote, and it's called something like "The Cat and the Toaster." And basically, the idea is that living systems like a cat cannot be dissected and reassembled in the same way that simpler systems, non-living systems like like toasters can be.
Mm.
And that's really what Jane Jacobs was saying in 1961. The people who thought the city was a toaster took the reins of power in prescribing for the city. And wherever they had the power, wherever they got the power to do so, they killed the cat. And
this is Robert Moses and guys like that, right?
The whole Urban Renewal Act, or whatever the actual title of it was, of 1949, it stayed in power for 25 years. That was a federal act. And yeah, everything was statistics, that kind of truth first, and then some reductive solution, is the two variable approach. And she's saying, look, I'm not here to argue with you about taste or fashion. I'm here to show that they're using a science. She doesn't say it quite this explicitly, but close. They're using a science that is appropriate for dead systems. And what they're doing to the living city is murdering it. And she uses that phrase, the witless murder of American cities. So that's what's at stake. If you use the wrong kind of science, so we're not talking about religion yet. We're not talking about philosophy or Romanides, saying that the Carolingians and the Merovingians and his whole thesis of what went wrong in the West,
which is fascinating.
Which is fine. I like the thesis, right. But we're just saying, hey, wake up. There's three kinds of science, and be explicit about which one you're using, and especially be explicit about why in the world we would use the first two kinds to study something living. Now, sometimes you do, but you have to be, tell us why.
The first two kinds being, I think you define them as truth and goodness.
So in her, this guy named Warren Weaver, and it was serendipitous that she encountered his work as she was writing Death and Life of Great American Cities. And he says, look, let's just give a history of science over the last 360 years, since 1600. He says, for the first 300 years, we could only do two variable problems, what he calls them problems in simplicity, but one variable controls or depends on another variable. And he says, hey, that works. And we came up with 1 million technologies based on that. And here's what they are, and it's fine. Then he says, between 1900 and 1920, we swiftly developed the computational ability, or the analytical ability, to handle millions and billions of variables in random systems. And he says, here's the power that gives us. And then he says, but only since about 1932 have we studied this third kind of problem, mid-range of variables. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The processes, it exists in time. There's some kind of flow in time to the thing. And he says, it is to be hoped that now that we have this discovery, it will be used widely. And I'm sitting here checking my watch in 2022 going, hey, when's that memo going to hit?
When's that? And the other weird thing.
Anytime you want, guys. Anytime you want.
The really odd thing I hear after, first things, I was just in Georgia just 2 weeks ago. I don't think we can call it a discovery. I mean, it's a discovery of things forgotten maybe in the West, but like the third way, the science of the whole, I mean, Hindus have been talking like that for 4,000 years. Like is it a rediscovery? And then is there some sort of bias in trying to embrace something that's old and quote religious? Is that maybe what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, there's something occult about life, right? There's something,
Yeah.
there's something, what's the word? There's something almost creepy about a living thing. You know, it's like, whoa,
Yeah,
like what,
mysterious. Yeah.
you're a 3-year-old boy and you want to stamp that ant dead. You know, it's like, what the heck's it doing?
Totally.
I remember
100%.
doing that. Who does he
I,
think he is?
I did that.
Crunch, crunch.
Yeah, like what is that creature that's stomping those little living, you know,
So,
insects? Right.
so,
What
so,
is this thing?
so we,
Frankenstein.
well, we can call it a discovery in this sense because once we, from 1600 on, you know, we have the falsifiable hypothesis, we have a real scientific method, and we start from the beginning or the end or whatever, but we start sort of with a clean slate. Eventually, we get to this. We have to admit that these other two kinds of science can't handle life. And so we, like you said, we rediscover. So what I say in the book is probably the ancients were better at holistic systems. And, you know, but they did not have our powerful
Right.
reductive techniques, you know.
Right.
And so we've switched, you know, we switched the abilities.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. It is the ancients. And it's not just anyone that's the way of the heart. Anyone, you know, I've got a book in here about, you know, somewhere in my bookshelves about Native American farming techniques and how they understood wholes as greater than the sum. I mean, that was the first thing that Squanto taught the Pilgrims is like, you don't just plant this crop alone, but you plant it with 2 other crops, and they're going to feed off each other, and you're going to put the dead fish in there too with the seeds.
Right. Well,
And
this is the thing as a convert to Orthodoxy, and you're Orthodox, and obviously your book is all about this. It's natural to liturgy. It's natural to worship and to religion. One of the things I kept thinking of reading your book, and by the way, guys, you got to read this book. It's fantastic. Was the ancient one, and you know is better than me. I used to be really good at history, and then I started this other life. But one of the ancient ideas was that religion, right, out of the Latin ligament, to bind, that it's not a question is if you're religious, sort of the way we speak in the modern world, like, oh, I'm not religious. The Latins and the ancients would say, well, no, that's the premise of your human existence is that you're religious. The question is what are the bindings? What are the ligaments that hold your body together, your worldview? And in that sense, we've taken maybe beauty out as one of the ligaments necessary for a proper binding, maybe something like that.
yeah, yeah, we have.
It's something like that. Anyway, I couldn't stop thinking about that as I read. Tell me about motivations for this book. You talk about it a little bit early on. They're really beautiful motivations. You were trying to get some answers done, right?
I mean, it's. I think what really triggered it was reading Jonathan Shea's Achilles in Vietnam, and there, what you have is what you have described. Though he doesn't use these terms, you take a person where the whole really is greater than the sum of its parts. A living soul, healthy child, young person, adult. If you traumatize them, it's like you capture them into a 2-variable scientific problem. There's the persecutor or the traumatic event, and we become objectified. We become an object of that event. And afterwards, we struggle to recover our wholeness. And we look like a 2-variable problem, a trigger, and you know we're off in another direction.
Yeah.
A memory, and we enter a different biological, hormonal, and chemical profile in the brain. And how do we get ourselves back to a whole? That's part of the question of so the question of soul healing is paralleled by when you're injured in that way, you are a 2-variable kind of dead problem. And we don't want that for you. We want to bring you back to full life. You can't be triggered. You can't be manipulated. You're not sabotaging yourself in ways that you yourself don't want to. So it was definitely connected with the science, and all these things were together for me, but also yeah. So it was concern for soldiers. That
It
was the
was, right?
primary.
It was
Yeah,
real humans who,
yeah.
how were you seeing them? How did they come into your world, these particular trauma victims? Were you
Well,
going out, or how did that work?
just I'm old enough to remember the fall of Saigon. Although I was a little kid, I thought it was the most terrible thing in the world. I sensed what a misery and a chaos was involved in that failure of our country, and um, and then of course it starts to enter the literature and movies like First Blood and other movies that lay out the experience of a traumatized person. And I just remember as a young person thinking, something profound is going on in that traumatized person. Well, that is a special kind of hell. And so I had that concern, and then years later, when I finally did get around to reading Achilles in Vietnam, by then I was a theologian at a seminary here at Holy Cross and everything, and I thought, well, here obviously Shea is describing the progressive excommunication of the person from others, from the world, and finally from their own self. So that was another, that was a thread,
And then it tied in for me. So there was a unique moment in my life standing in a church with smells and bells, as they sometimes say about Orthodoxy, where I can't say I could intellectualize or articulate the healing going on, but something was happening in there. And it feels like you had a similar experience growing up where, like, I don't know, this is special. And somehow that got attached to the notion that I'm going to help these guys. It does feel like you're trying. It's not missionary work as much as it's like, guys, I got this medicine. I've had it my whole life, but I really want you to try it. It feels like that through your book. Like, check this out. It's like this hidden thing. Am I right to say that's something like the book?
something like that. Yeah, I think it's a feeling that war is such a terrible thing. I mean, I know that it's a part of a fallen world. But at the time, I think I wrote it. I just thought these guys deserve better, and they're not the only ones who are traumatized. And the fact that we're, according to Jonathan Shea, and then a book I read later as I was writing my book, Bessel van der Kolk's "The Body Keeps the Score." We're not only not healing trauma, we often are making it worse by our attempts to heal it. And yeah, I'm a little older now. I don't have quite that sense of outrage, and it's because that's dangerous too, to sit in that for too long as a motivation. I think I was also reading Wounded by Love, by Elder Porphyrios, and
Okay.
his, and that's, I think that's really what drove me to coin this very marketable phrase. I like aesthetics, and I like marketing slogans of beauty first. And I think it's a good slogan and it makes sense. And you could see that trauma was an encounter with ugliness and malice that seemed to disclose the existential meaninglessness of life or of the world. Whereas how we were created by God and how meant to be recreated is an encounter with beauty or theophany, but beauty within which we discover a life-giving morality. The practice, devotion to that beauty, practice of that goodness makes us become true. It also can, there's less of focus on knowing the truth and more focus on becoming true. Like you said a moment ago, these ancients didn't have our scientific knowledge, but they were true.
Yeah. Yeah. They were closer
in ways that we don't seem to be.
Let's take a quick break, but I want to ask you about Jordan Peterson, who might disagree with you. Not that he's here with us, but the quick break on WAWTAR. Hey, Mal. Hey.
Hey, Mal. Hey.
Molly.
Hey, Mal. Hey.
You're a super donor, and you're
Hey.
here to tell us how
Super.
you can aid us in coming up with great ideas for raising
Eat
more
you?
money.
I can aid you?
No, aid, AID.
Oh, okay. I was like, I don't really want
You
to
can
eat
assist
you,
us.
John. I think we should probably do some slap bracelets. Do you know what slap bracelets are?
No,
You slap them, and then they become bracelets.
wait, what?
Anyway, the kids in the early 90s loved them. So
Wait, you
I just think,
snap them or slap them?
well, maybe that's like a Rocky Divide thing. Like you slap them here on the West Coast and you snap them on the East Side. But anyway, bracelets. That's my idea.
You
for
think
this
we should
week.
have First Things Foundation bracelets?
Yes, but first you need to make the what would Uncle Seth do
T-shirts?
bracelet. No, this isn't the t-shirt idea, John. This is the bracelet idea.
Okay, and you think that will
Little
help
by
us-
little by little.
that will meet
baby
our
steps.
budgetary goals by selling Uncle Seth
yeah.
bracelets?
Yeah, but then people can like, if they don't end up selling, then you can just like offload them somewhere. No big deal, because people won't know what WWUSD stands for.
Hi, we're back. I want to ask you about Jordan Peterson, but you know what? At the beginning, I forgot. As per, we opened a Georgian restaurant as per our First Things Foundation work. It's a nonprofit restaurant. We toast there, and I don't know. Have you ever gone to a Georgian feast? You ever
No.
encountered
No.
any Georgians? Oh, come on! I'm going to come up there and we'll throw one. But
Yeah.
there's always a toast, and in some ways, there it's relevant to your book, in that the Toastmaster's idea is to unite heaven and earth in the heart, sort of in the middle. So the bowels of your body sort of represent Eros, and the head represents the eternal, the stable versus the unstable, united in the heart. So how about a toast to beauty found in that center place? May we all have a slice of it so we can heal. Kagimarjos. That means to you the victory. Kagimarjos. So tell me about Peterson says again and again, and don't get me wrong, I think he's really helpful to whole swaths of people. And I really like what he's doing, and whatever. But he's really often talking about putting spiders back in front of people who are traumatized by spiders, and putting the trauma back in front of people as a methodology. And I think it comes out of Freud and whatnot. But what's your thoughts on that as a method of fixing trauma?
I mean, handsome is as handsome does. I think that is a general, good pastoral guideline. Like what is methodologies and first principles and all that? Like what is working for one particular person? And I think about that, this handsome is as handsome does in terms of complexity, not in terms of utilitarianism. Because, and here's what I mean. Napoleon was asked, what would you rather have, a good general or a lucky general? And he said, give me the lucky general every time. And what that means is that combat and the clash of armies, that are reacting to each other, and, the classic Clausewitz thing, under a situation of friction and uncertainty and all that, is a complex system. And the person who appears lucky is more likely doing something that we just can't put our finger on. And so there has to be some respect. It's not utilitarianism exactly, because we don't really know what the heck they're doing, or if maybe they're not doing.
I get that.
But in that sense, handsome is as handsome does with, what brings people along. And if it's going to therapy twice a week or 3 times a week, and if it's a little bit of, introduction of the thing that frightens us, fine. I think that in general, though, it seems like what we need is a deepening sense of integration
Yes.
that comes in the presence of theophany or beauty or communion. So when we encounter a saint, something is restored in us.
Right.
And I
Right.
explain that in the book because a lot of people do say, okay, before you can, attempt to heal this traumatic stress, you have to, remove the person from the traumatizing situation. And what I say is that for some people, the first time that they are truly removed from a traumatizing situation is when they encounter a saint. The rest of us are just too rough. We don't know how, we don't know why, we don't know what we're doing wrong, but we're too hard.
It
And
makes me,
it's re-traumatizing.
well, because our edges are too sharp. It makes me think, can I share this thought? But I want you to comment on this because it could be crazy, but it makes me think like the pictures behind me. I've got one of my father there, and he is disintegrated right now, like without sounding crap. And that's what death is on some level. It's a disintegration, but his picture is a symbolos or an fully integrate. Now, is he present? Here's what I mean. He's present. When I look at that picture, I am not traumatized. I am actually toward healing. It's really wild. But the pixels themselves are like the cells of my father's body. Apart, they are disintegrated and deadly or something, or death filled. But when their pixels are all put back together, there's an actual presence of like, and it's joy. And I don't really have to go back to his death. I can just stay in that moment. And it reminds me of an icon of a saint. Like if you see St. Paisios, then the icon must be kissed. Like I must approach that icon because it's holding something together for me. And thank you. And maybe, that's the beautiful thing. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think of that? I love that. I don't know. You brought that out of me. It feels real to me though.
I mean, I think that's true, and I think that an encounter with wholeness, is just a fantastic thing. Beauty can be a fantastically healing thing. I think, in the West, and probably someone like Jordan Peterson wants to emphasize the cross more than the resurrection, right? And for him, that cross is responsibility, growing up, facing the fact that your life is zero, and if you continue on this path in 10 years, it'll be, even less than zero. And I understand that. And then the resurrection that is offered is just his love. Although he's not really saying that, but that is what's happening. Like his kindness, his love, his integrity, his concern that people not waste their lives is like this father thing. And that is a sufficient, beautiful cover for people to accept the cross that he's also offering. What we see in the church repeatedly is people who are so mild, mildness is the thing that's missing, are so intensely mild that although they say nothing about morality and somehow we repent utterly in their presence. Now, I'm not saying that's the only way, and I certainly love being in a parish where the priest lays down the law a little bit, and it's and maybe more than a little bit, and it's good. For me right now where I'm at, especially, it's preferred. But we do have this continued witness of some people, just the gaze of love, and that's enough.
Is that meekness?
It's meekness is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, it's the missing link.
Just being an Athos once, and then also meeting to St. Anthony with Elder Frem, and this is going to sound weird too, and then working in West Africa, when I would go into a village that people didn't know me, the people were so mild. I like your word. They were so willing to just give me a comfortable seat and be hospitable and simple, but really simple. like almost to a point of making me uncomfortable. Well, Elder Ephraim had like this mildness to him that reminded me of this phrase, the meek will inherit the earth. And I see it in these places where we work. It's pretty wild. And I always think, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be that kind of meek. And maybe I should try harder. Can you even try to be like that with this big brain we're carrying around in the intellectual West? Is it possible?
I don't know.
I love it. I love the way you, I don't know. That's really, that's it.
I was, something happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was getting a haircut and I was coming back to my campus or whatever. And, it was one of these moments where traffic was jammed everywhere. So I fired up the Waze app, WAZE, and all of a sudden it's taking me on side roads, unused roads that I have driven within hundreds of yards of and never seen in my life, in 15 years of being here. And these roads, they have a softness. There's a gentleness to the curve of the road. There's a softness to the houses, to the setbacks. Everything about it is mild. And that's how we built as Americans until we came back from World War II and said, we're going to beat our swords into plowshares and use our fantastic military prowess and militarize the whole damn country, and in the name of progress and, materialism. And we built, the cookie cutter suburb. What's important to see in those suburbs, that we've built since the war is that there's nothing feminine in them.
Yeah.
There's nothing mild. It's the proscription of femininity. It's a war. The country is on a war footing in its building program. And just like, every soldier had the same rifle, every freaking strip mall has the same 15 junky retailers and lousy restaurants. And it's just, everything is, but it's all okay because we're at war. The war is against God knows what. And, you're in the army now and you got to just suck it up and get the job, get the mission done.
Yeah. Meekness doesn't have a place in that. Yeah. I think you're really right. I think you can see the same approach to aid. And I know you like this topic too, but the Marshall Plan, which was really good at extending that military sort of precision mentality back into Europe to build. They rebuilt Europe. That was then extended to, quote, developing nations, to every type of culture, not just European culture. It was extended in its form to every culture, to Africa, to Asia. And that precision and that productivity was demanded of local people so that they could, quote, catch up. And we brought it home, like you said. Yeah, that's interesting. Schooling became that way more and more.
More and more. Everyone has been conscripted. And of course, debt is the great lever of conscription. Everyone's in debt. Everyone's, paycheck to paycheck, and all these, we put these third world countries into horrible indebtedness. They can't escape thing. Everyone's in this mess. And it's now, but statistically, we're better off, right? We have longer life expectancy. We have a higher per capita, whatever.
I know, but I don't want to live longer. Do I want to live longer? I interrupted you. Go ahead. Do we want to live longer?
As a problem in the first two kinds of science, hey, it's all been a success.
True.
Except the fact that the debts cannot be repaid shows you that the third kind of science, by the standards of wholeness, these developing economies that we developed are so stunted and so malformed. As I try to say somewhere, I don't remember where, look, if foreign aid had been done well, it would be like Norway's national fund, where they invest their oil money in stocks or something. If we had done it well, the US would own, 20% of the stock market in every country on earth. We wouldn't need to work anymore. We would just live off no, instead, no one can ever pay back these development loans.
Right.
They're all a sham. They're all a joke.
Right.
They're all meant to make work for bankers, unions, capitalists, industrialists, and religious philanthropists. And they're not germane to what development is.
That's right.
But no, they're just not. They're just instruments of empire building.
Well, they don't attend to beauty, to wholeness. They don't attend to the person, which, of course, what you said earlier, your analogy, I guess it is, or the conversation you had about the cat and the toaster. I don't think I'll ever forget that.
It's a good one. And these guys down the street coined that. One. Other people have thought of that, too, I think, but and that's not a bad book. They wrote a whole book on Christian ministry from the perspective and saying, hey, if it's a living system, then how do you befriend that system?
You know who did this for me at a high level, and he was Orthodox, Philip Sherrard in The Rape of Man in Nature. I don't know if you ever read that. Oh my God.
I didn't, but Sherrard had that eye for wholeness. Yeah.
Yes. And his book basically takes you through the cat and the toaster and how the West embraced the toaster. And he's almost banging on the computer or on his desk and saying, and don't get me wrong, I have a lot of friends who are scientists, but he's basically screaming I won't curse, but he's saying, why are we listening to these people who have an incomplete understanding of wisdom? They're really good at one, maybe two aspects of the whole. Why do we keep lifting? And he's mad. He's not mad, but he's not pulling punches, and he's showing how it's tied into the theology, how the theology is now what we would think of as anthropology. Of course, they took out the theos. And so they've actually created us all into these toasters. And he's like, why are we listening to them? And it's really fascinating. That book started me on this old world, new world kind of, well, your book, I feel like is volume 2 of like, wait a minute, guys, slow down. It's really beautiful that way.
I mean, Wendell Berry's The Unsettling of America, E.F. Schumacher's Small is Beautiful, Christopher Alexander's The Timeless Way of Building, and you can just add and add and add books to that. I think really what I wanted to do in the Ethics of Beauty was how to pull all those together by saying that that beauty exists in science. We have a postmodern science. It's called biology. It's called systems theory. And to say that, we can, right? I didn't want to write a mystical book that is just one more poem to the old way. The Ethics of Beauty is kind of dull in a sense. It just lays it out. Okay, this is it, and this is a simple choice to make. Jane Jacobs in chapter 22 of Death and Life, she doesn't say we can't use the first two kinds of science. She just says, we have to know which one to use at which time. That's just so. That's all.
Which is brilliant. Which is, by the way, something
she saves the Enlightenment from itself.
Okay, so thank you, because often I'm, for folks who like this podcast, I hammer hard on the Enlightenment, but I get these listeners every now and then will be like, it's not all bad, is it? And of course it's not all bad. Human beings are always creative, and they're always doing something like trying to be beautiful. It's just, we still need it in our vocabulary, right? We should be able to use these terms without an embarrassment. I like what your book implies. There's a couple references you make to, like, you shouldn't be embarrassed to say, well, what about the beauty quotient?
Yeah.
But how does that fit in, guys? Like,
Yeah. And yeah. Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. So yeah, and in general, we get more done if we can let the anger side of things go. And certainly when we first discover that we're being conned, we're going to be outraged. But we do have to kind of work through that and say, well, here you see in agriculture, for example. So I think like this guy, Gabe Brown, he's a rancher in North Dakota, and he is kind of one of the deans, one of the five or six leaders of this regenerative agriculture movement. And it's a much more complex systems approach to farming even than organic agriculture is. And it really has so much hope for climate mitigation. We just can capture so much carbon recaptured into the soil and make the soil healthier and packed with biology. And there's so much, he's had so much success in increasing how much rain his land can infiltrate per hour.
Mm-hmm.
He used to do a half an inch an hour. Now he does 13 inches an hour. That's a 26-fold increase.
Wow.
He says in some of his lectures, drought, we cause drought. If we're throwing away all that, if the other 12 inches of rain are just running off, then of course we're going to have drought afterwards. But so I think it's important to pick and choose these kind of movements and invest in them. But as a dean of a college, I think that, we have to teach people what the three kinds of science are, how they relate to beauty, the difference between a cat and a toaster. We have to get people talking the language of systems, of living systems.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a liberal arts education, I believe you have an advantage in you've cultivated an aesthetic sense, an eye for wholeness that helps you see when a living system is healthy or unhealthy. Whereas engineering education, as we currently do, can tend to blind you to that holistic, what your eye can obviously see with a little bit of training.
Yeah.
And so your education will make you dumber.
Let me ask you a question about that. And we're just going to take one quick, teeny little break. Be right back. Hey guys, more than 21 projects on 4 continents, 12 field workers, and lots of good vibes. We help local people, visionaries, we call them impresarios, and those people are all about helping their own community and their own families. They're fire starters, change makers. We find them in places like East Africa, West Africa, the Caucasus, Central America, and right here at home. And then we say, what do you need to make facile? That's the French word for easy. What do you need to make your vision come true? And then we support them with funds and wise people and intellectual assistance, and most of all, with whatever they need. That's what our field workers do in the Peace Corps style, living in mud huts. This is the end of year appeal. We're trying to meet our match of $75,000 by January 1st. We're trying to raise all of the funds we need for 2023, and we're doing it today on our website, www.first-things.org. Go to our website, assist us by becoming a recurring donor, or even better yet, we have an ask. We need to get to $75,000. I would love for you to give $75,000. Or contact me and give $75,000, or give $5 and you will double your offer. Whatever it is, our money goes directly to the field workers who go directly to the field. Everything you give from now until January 1st is all about the field. At First Things Foundation, our goal is honest aid offered authentically. One-to-one, face-to-face, given with love and in truth. First Things Foundation, creation begins with sacrifice. Thank you. So here's the question. Can we recover? So one of the problems, as you know, and I'm not speaking to about your university. I'm not, it's okay. It doesn't matter. We can speak in generalities. The university itself has succumbed to the two truth ethics system of all low, all mind, intellect, and goodness. And so, I'm not saying it's impossible. Is there some sort of metanoia that is going to happen on a university level, or the place wherever kids go after, say, 15 or 16 years old? Maybe it's not a university system. Maybe there's a whole change. Is there something that has to happen to what we have, to where we have arrived? Do we have to change something about us? How does it work?
Oh yeah. I mean, first of all, I didn't know that the lockdown was going to last as long as it did, or become as politicized as it was, and just try to close all public debate on the wisdom of that. It was just weird. Now we're in a situation where we've kind of are putting the Russians into a corner, and we seem to be kind of who knows what's going to happen there. I don't know. I'm not laughing, because it's tragic and horrible, the people that are dying, but it does feel like our leaders are just playing a game of poker, and they're not really, or a game of chess on all sides. I mean, we could be in bigger trouble than we realize. I mean, I hope that's not the case. Okay, assuming that we don't have, a general third world war. People need something that will give them training in nonlinear order in living systems. Orthodox liturgy does that. It's pretty simple. If you immerse yourself in it, you gain a feel for organic order. But it could come from other directions. And then people also need to find some sort of faith that will help them to respond to violence with mildness.
Yeah, that's right.
So wherever those two things come from, and again, the church can give you that. It doesn't necessarily give you that, but it can. And wherever people find those things, I hope they find it soon.
Yeah, I think the culture is responsible for more than I think we'd like to admit as hyper individualists. The culture gives you those tools on some level. Now, mom and dad, I get it, give you something maybe countercultural, but they're still a part of the culture. And that's interesting. Yeah, a way to become mild. For me, in my experience, it had a lot to do with living in foreign environments where I was really foreign. If you go to Copenhagen, you can kind of get along. Like London's not going to throw you for a loop if you're coming from, New York City. But if you dropped into a West African village filled with Muslims in Mali, you better become mild on some level. Like you have to slow down. And it really helped me, and it also introduced me to liturgy. How do people get introduced, I wonder? I mean, you're doing it on some level at the Holy Cross, right? I mean, something like that's happening there.
I mean, not me personally, right? Like I'm the dean of the undergraduate of Hellenic College here at the seminary, and it's something happened here. I don't know when or what or how. Our chapel services are in some other world, and the campus it's, but you can't point to any specific. You cannot point to a specific programmatic intention. The campus somehow became holy ground. And I don't know when exactly that happened. I was here between 91 and 94 as a student. It wasn't the same. And now I've been here since 2005, and it has increased.
Yeah.
And I cannot put my finger on how. I met an abbess recently, and I don't want to say her name because I had the feeling that she was the most prayerful person I've ever met. And for some reason, she had been on campus, and she said, I felt the same thing when the nuns were staying there. We saw that something was happening. Well, that's the thing. It's not so much an ideology or program. Some places just get touched by that fire. I don't know for how much longer we'll be like that. I'm not saying that someone's trying to change it. I'm just saying it's in God's time.
That's right.
but pilgrimage is crucial. If you know of such a place, then try to go to such a place and just sit there and say, huh, something's happening. What is that thing?
Yeah, it reminds me of a book called Sugar. It's a
Oh, what a great title.
Yeah, it's about sugar. It's like the history of sugar. And it's written by a doctor. I can't remember his name right now. I should. But basically what he says is he started essentially like fat farms in the United States where people go to lose their fat. Because basically what he saw is no matter how hard he worked, no matter how hard, he would have people lose. I mean, he would work one-on-one with people daily and they would lose weight. But then as soon as he was detached from them and they went back to whatever they were doing, right back on. So he created farms and he was like, this is going to do it. We're going to get these people there. And the culture changed, but then they went back home.
I was just checking my Gatorade. I thought I had the sugar-free one. It's the normal.
There you go. So he was saying the culture, we've literally put sugar in everything, that you're not able to avoid it without a fundamental dislocation or relocation, you know? So I think that's something like what you're saying. On some level, maybe not. So
well, in general, I have to say that, Jane Jacobs said once, she said, beauty is not to be had for the asking. In other words, she didn't think that in city design, aesthetics could be like a primary concern. But she thought that certain, key nodes or key buildings, we should try to hire an architect who can make it beautiful and kind of roll the dice. You don't know. It's like making a TV show.
That's
you
true.
Don't know if it's going to be any good until so. But there's beauty in this other sense, which is the wholeness and the integrity of a healthy neighborhood, a healthy city street. And in that sense, she said, we know what are the 4 generators of city diversity, and we can start with neighborhoods where only one of those 4 is missing, add the missing one, and then move on from there and let, sort of a rising tide lift all boats across the city and gradually get to city health.
did she understand, would she have understood your vocabulary? And we can't go all, you guys got to read this part, but would she understand the way you talked about city as liturgy? Or is that your twist?
That was my first letter to her in January of 2000. And I said, I've doing a dissertation over here, and the way you describe cities, they are literally liturgies. And, I gave all the reasons why.
Will you explain that for our listeners real quick?
Yeah,
it may not be quick, but it's time.
People who know her will know the famous phrase that she coined, the ballet of the city street. So think of like a liturgy of the hours, but on a street. Liturgy of the hours in the sense that at every hour of the day, something is happening on that street, whether it's commuters leaving or commuters coming back, or school children, or the garbage truck, or that kind of, it's almost like a procession or a parade of players across that cityscape. And she said that is crucial for city safety, first of all, that there's always eyes on the street. It's not the police who keep us safe primarily, but each other. Well, the police is kind of a backup, right? You can call them if there's, but that safety then also translates into commercial possibilities. There's enough people on a street at all times of the day that a store there, can make a go of it.
Mm-hmm.
She said there are stores down in Wall Street. This is 1959, 1960 when she's writing, that are literally open for 3 hours in the morning and 1 hour in the evening. That's it. Because the rest of the day, there's no one there. So she was looking for neighborhoods that there was something going on the street almost 24/7, ideally. So that ballet, which I think of as this liturgy, this work of the people, it's a procession, a return.
Yeah,
it involves,
that's right.
it's the foundation of safety, of commercial diversity in a city, commercial exuberance. And it's the way we all work together to keep the systems of the city going, to pay for the streets and the sidewalks and all the things that happen. Then it's liturgy, a city's liturgy in another sense, the relationships that form, that people become more actualized, whatever the word is, they become more individuated through those relationships. Cities are places of risk and sacrifice and abundant reward.
And so
yeah.
no, it's so that it's not so much that most of my coming up time in Orthodoxy was in the city, New York City, in a church and monastery that was on 3rd Avenue. Sorry, 3rd Street down in Alphabet City.
Okay.
And so I keep seeing me up there for matins, just above the city that has the activity below the bread. I can see the bread guy.
Yeah.
And so it's all like a fractal. What's happening inside the window in there, the participation of the people, the work of the people is happening below.
Well, plus, yeah, go on.
No, go ahead. No, that's it. That's it.
Plus, I argue that, and I picked up on this in other researchers, there's an entire kind of city genesis. Like, why does a city get founded? A conqueror, an emperor, colonists, whatever. But in Christian history, in the Middle East and in Europe and Russia, in America's Southwest, where a liturgy goes, a city follows.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because the monastics provide some kind of protection or inspiration, but I think it's more existential than that. I think where the liturgy is, somehow life generates around it. And my argument of why is Mount Athos, avaton, as they say in Greek, why is it blocked to one gender? Because otherwise it would just be a city. It would become the most sought after family real estate in the world. I mean, I have friends who, from their porch, this is a beautiful village west of Kavala, you can see the Holy Mountain across the water. I'm just first time I went there, I'm like, what? Your kids grew up like that? Looking at that? What? That's the ultimate thing. So, and you see it in some female monasteries as well. They're avaton, because otherwise it would just become, it wouldn't be the desert anymore. It would just become a city.
And you're right, though. It would become a sought after city.
Oh yeah, it would just become, Los Angeles. All those, from San Francisco, through San Antonio or whatever, all those towns started as Catholic missions.
That's right. But then it would play out again because people like St. Anthony and all those monks would leave. Ironically.
And it is playing out in St. Anthony's. How many people have moved to be within an easy drive of St. Anthony's? Hundreds of people have done that.
Happening.
There was no water there. The saint discovered the water. No one could live there. Now, thousands of people can. So the saints generate cities, and heaven, we know, is nothing but, is a city where nothing but liturgy happens. It is a city liturgy. So once I discovered it in her book, then I'm like, oh, Book of Revelation. That's what we know.
Wow, what a discovery!
It was fantastic. And she came back and said, "You're right." She said, "You're the best. You're the best interpreter of my work that I'm aware of. You're showing me what my own works mean." And we had that kind of relationship, for the next 6 years, 5.5 years until she died.
So she's at the core of your sort of intellectual abilities. She's in there.
I am nothing without her. And I think someone could say, someone might not think that makes me anything. I don't care. I'd rather be nothing and tied to her, but genius.
That's the beauty of honor. When you know someone that way, nobody can tell you otherwise. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Right.
That's old school. That's old school.
For me, she's the intellectual of the 20th century. And I know there are other more complicated people, and Heisenberg and Einstein and physics or whatever, but I don't see anyone seeing in such a penetrating foundational way about the nature of order in important ways as she is.
So just end with this, because I am inclined to take the Enlightenment and go, oh gosh, get rid of that. But I feel that you're not willing to do that. Is there something good about the New World sort of that you say to yourself, let's not lose that part? Help us out. Because usually people are, I don't know. Or I can give you a test too, just to see how New World you are. It won't take long. It'll take just 5 minutes. Maybe that's the last thing we do. But tell me, what is it about the Enlightenment Society or post Enlightenment that we should say, hey, this is solid stuff?
Well, the
Philosophically, I'm speaking.
yeah, philosophically, the experimental method, right? To say that we have observation, we formulate, theories about that, about the natural world. Okay, we had that, since the pre-Socratics. We had that in human nature. This has always been there. But what the Enlightenment does is it says, let's take that insight about the world and let's formulate it in a way that we can make it risk death. And if it resurrects, then we'll believe it. And that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Wow. All right, guys. I do this every now and then. Dr. Patitsas, I'm going to do it with you if you just give me 5 more minutes. It's a little test that we developed. What happened was we kept talking about old world, new world, and I realized for some folks who have lived in, pretty old school places, it was easy to understand what I was saying. But for many people, they're Americans. It was a hard thing to detect. Like, what do you mean?
Well, watch me flunk this thing completely. Okay, bring it on.
You can't flunk it. But it's 5 questions. And all it's trying to do is place you in the context of, and I designed this test, which clearly makes it really good science. Let's just be honest. It's got to be really good if I designed it scientifically. It's a disaster. But it tends to work as a way to go, oh, and I'll tell you how you do in 1 second. So all you got to do is answer. You're just answering 3, which is like, and by the way, you won't get in trouble for this. You will retain your job after this is over. I promise.
I hope so.
I promise. It's not political. You won't get canceled, probably. I'm having fun with you. You won't. 3 means, oh, heck yes. I heard the question. I am drawn toward a yes, a definite yes. 3. 2 is probably true. 1 is probably untrue. And 0 is that is not. I'm not drawn to that.
Okay.
You ready? 3 is all in, 0 is no way. And then you get to it. Here's your first question. When you die, you won't really die like all the way. It's more like you'll be sleeping in some fashion, in some fashion, waiting for the next world.
That's a 3. Yeah, let's go with the 3.
3. We're testing your old world, new world, bona fides.
It's
3. Here's your second question. The best way to get to know me, I'm speaking on your behalf, the best way to get to know you is to ask someone else about you.
Huh. Yeah, that's definitely at least a 2, I would say. I don't know about the best, but sure, I'll give it a 2 for sure.
2,
yeah.
Probably. It's okay. It works with me.
It's
the best. Yeah, the best. Oh, sorry. Third question. When you carry a picture around of a friend or a parent or somebody, and the picture's in your purse or your wallet, you're actually carrying that person around with you in some real way.
Yeah, I'll give that a 3. Why not? I thought you were going to ask, I often kiss that picture, and I was going to give that a 3 too.
Oh, that would have been hot. We got to send this back to the lab.
All right.
We got to fix this test.
Is there 2 more questions?
2 more and we're done. Respect is not earned. It is owed by you to others. Respect is not earned, it's owed, primarily owed by you to others.
Yeah, that's a 3 and a 0, I think.
Interesting.
Because I think it's we do want to. I guess our integrity as humans, I owe that respect to each person. Yeah, so I would say whatever that number would be.
3.
Yes.
I know what you mean.
Let's
This
go with
is
that
good.
then. Let's go with that then.
Let's go with 3.
Yeah.
And finally, the last question. And again, it works depending on your station in life. But you hope and expect to take your parents in and live with you in the house when they get old, or / if that's not a situation for you, you fully expect to live in the house with your kids, preferably their house, when you get old and infirmed.
Well, for the parents, I would say, 3 million. Definitely. They're my problem, and my joy. With my kids, I gotta say, I don't know. I don't have kids, but I would think, gosh, can't I just live on a boat? I suppose. Maybe I'm a little conflicted there.
Well, we'll go with you as having the parent conversation. 3. Okay, you ready?
All right.
Dr. Patitsas?
Yeah.
Tim, you have scored a 14 on we call this the lightometer. Just how light and lightened are you? The lightometer tells us that you are not a winner of the Francis Bacon Award. That would be a 0. So you did not win that. As you go up the scale, you are not the high nooner, which is the new world. The bright light of the new world shines on you wherever you go. That's not you. You are not the shining city dweller on the hill. You're not even the suburban. You are the villager.
Amen. Let's hear for the village.
You're a high villager too. Here's what you are. The old world way is in your bones. There's a really good chance you hate malls. Places like Algeria and Ethiopia roll out the red carpet for you. Your Spotify.
Go on.
It's almost over, I promise. Your Spotify collection includes chants from some really hard to pronounce provinces, and you love that you can't fully understand them, and you love hierarchy. Bring more hierarchy. That would be the villager, and you are it, scientifically, of course.
So I don't hate malls, but for the record, I hate myself whenever I'm in a mall. Does that count? Yeah, I've never been in a mall and not felt a creeping and steadily increasing sense of self-loathing. Not because I'm in a mall, just like existential self-loathing.
What a better answer. That's a great answer. Yes. There you go.
So can I put in a plug for Hellenic College here, just briefly?
Please do. Please. That's what I was just going to ask you.
We're a liberal arts college, but we got one of the world's great chapels with liturgies. Services twice a day. It's a holy place. Send your kids. And we also have 2 professional majors, psychology and business management. I want to put in a plug too for Beauty First Films and our liturgical seasons calendar. You can cut this out if you need to.
No, we're not cutting this out at all. I want to hear.
But we have an Etsy store, and you can just, if you search Beauty First Films, you will find, and our calendar overthrows the tyranny of months. So instead of each page being a separate month, each page is one of the 7 main liturgical seasons of the church year. And it's a more humane way to think about time. It's a more holistic approach. It's less atomistic and smashing of your life. I don't want to put in a plug for the book. We've sold 5,000 copies of the book. If you want to buy the book, go ahead and find it at stnicholaspress.net. But no pressure there, because it is what it is. It's a big, fat, heavy book, 740 pages. So,
yeah, but I have to say it is making its rounds, and it should lead everybody over to Hellenic College and to your work at the school. It should, because
send your 18-year-olds; they'll love it. We'll love
Yes,
Hellenic.
absolutely. We'll link all that. Dr. Patitsas, we'll link it. We'll make sure that whoever's listening to this, whether it be on the YouTube video channel or on our iPod or wherever, Spotify, wherever it is.
And John, until
link
we meet again, this was very nice. And next time we can talk about Jane Jacobs' thoughts on economic development too. Be nice.
Could we do that next time?
Yeah.
I would love that. I'm deep involved in what that looks like. So
yeah, and I'm not. I just have her perfect, pristine theory.
okay, that's next time. And you are wonderful and easy. And if I'm up in Boston, I'll look you up. You promise? You won't be like, oh, not this guy.
No, what's if you come to Boston? I haven't been to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in a long time, so we got to go there.
We'll go. And if you're in the South, we open this restaurant and we do the Georgian feast called the Supra. In fact, I'll even tell you about this article. I'll send it to you, where there's all the symbolic nature of this dinner. And our restaurant is going well. You have a place at any of our tables if you come down. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless. Greet your people up there in Boston.
All right. See you later, everyone.
Take care. It was wonderful. Okay, saying goodbye to that guy. That's sad. I don't want to say goodbye to that guy. What? Yeah, that was us talking about all kinds of things, but mostly beauty and how we're missing the boat. It's a thing, guys, beauty. And so it goes on WAWTAR. Heavy things lightly. Thank you to Dr. Timothy Patitsas. Make sure you check out their work over at Hellenic College and Holy Cross and all that they're doing up in Boston. Visit them. Visit that chapel he talks about. Or not. But most of all, check out the book. It's fantastic. Ethics of Beauty from 2019. Please check us out at First Things, where we're looking for your donation. That is true. Yeah, that is true. www.first-things.org. We're in a drive to make a match. We have a beautiful family foundation that's offered us $75,000 if we can raise and match that $75,000 by January 1st. Ticking clock sound here. Time is ticking. Be a part of our matching donation push. Become a recurring donor or not. Either way, we'll count you toward the beauty and the love that is feeding our field workers and supporting their projects. Check us out. Check out our projects. We've got not a few. They're on our website. Go check us out and become a donor at First Things.